Hey, it's Brock here with Uncommon Aquatics, and today we're going to be optimizing my new seamless sump. I've had the sump up and running for about 48 hours, and I can tell a big difference in the clarity of the water, but there's a bunch of things that I maybe didn't think of or could have done better in the original setup, and today I want to cover all of those. The first thing I mentioned in the original setup was that the pump I ordered for it was only 800 gallons per hour, when the sump can handle 2,400 per hour, and my overflow can pull 1,200 per hour. So as soon as possible, I want to work that up closer to 2,000 gallons per hour being filtered through the aquarium. So the first thing I did was get a bigger pump. This Hygger pump is basically the same pump I run on my other sump, except I got a little bit bigger model. This is the 55 watt Hygger DC pump. DC pumps are better for sumps because they allow you to control the speed. They use less power. You can fine tune them. They're quieter. Everything's better about them except they're going to be a little more expensive. But by buying a product like Hygger, you can save a lot of money. Hygger is very affordable. Now, I've been running this same basic pump on the other sump for long enough that I feel really confident that it's going to do the job for me. And there's nothing wrong with the pump I have on here. I'm just going to use it for somewhere else because it's a little bit smaller pump than what I want. So with this pump, you have a digital controller, which is something you absolutely have to have. And you got the pump itself, which has low water shutoff protection and that adjustability. It's also got a lot of versatility. Like you can configure it in different ways. For instance, instead of this screen, I'm going to use this downward facing screen just because it's less likely to suck up something like floating plants that find their way into the sump. So we're going to use this like this, and then we're going to find the right fitting. It comes with several different fitting options that you can put on it. We're going to find the one that adapts to the hose that I used, which was a 3/4 inside diameter flexible hose. And I think it's going to be this right here. And we just put that on there, put the nut on, and that is the entirety of the setup. So now all I'm going to do is switch my hose from the other pump to this one. Just pop off the hose clamp, switch it out, and we're going to immediately increase the amount of water flow we have going through the system, which is going to clean the water better. So I'll get that done, then we'll be back with that next upgrade or optimization that we're doing on the sump. And while we're at it, if you're interested in this pump, I'll put a link to it in the video description. It's a good high quality pump for what you pay for it. If you're new to sumps, I want to explain to you my process for setting the speed on this pump. So this is the overflow. Water needs to be coming over this. If I turn the pump up faster, it will suck this chamber down and suck those chambers down. Those water levels are going to match this one. If I let that water level be up here and the tank's full, and then the pump gets shut off by the power outage or anything, the aquarium overflows. So this needs to be set up where there's room in here, and the water level needs to be maintained just above this overflow line, which is where we're at. Now how do I accomplish that? With this control box right here. If I turn this up, see there, that shows I'm getting 69% of the possible wattage. If I turn it up to 100, it'll suck that dry. But if I do the math, this pump's supposed to run 1,750 gallons per hour. My overflow says it can do 1,200. What is 1,200 divided by 1,750? That is 68%. So that tells me if I should be running this at 68% power. So that's where I'm at, and it seems to be working. Now, this is not an exact science. Possibly this doesn't overflow the full 1,200, and I'd have to turn this down. It's just something you keep an eye on and you adjust. Dropping that water level down to here means it's not overflowing out of these baskets. If this water is overflowing over these baskets like it was with my smaller pump, then they're not doing their job. The next thing I've done to fine-tune this filter or optimize it is take this bag of Purigen and put it up under here where the overflow from my sock chamber comes out right here, and I want it to overflow onto that Purigen, which purifies the water. That is your chemical filtration. So the bag that you just saw came out of this bag of Purigen, I got at the local pet store. Premium synthetic filter resin. Now this says it only treats 100 gallons and this tank is 200. So really I should have got 2 of these. I may add another one later. Next thing is, I used to have a heater right over here that took up a bunch of space. It was an eyesore. I wish this tank had a black painted background, but I'm not going to change it right now because then all of this would blend in and you wouldn't see any mess inside the tank. But I've removed this stuff so you're not seeing it. That heater is an AQQA heater. It's a really nice heater. This tells me my set temperature and my current temperature. Now, I took that out of the tank and put it in the sump. So you could put the heater in here, you could put it in here. I guess you could put it in any of the chambers, but to me, there is a risk that at some point I could get things out of balance and this sump could suck down to the bottom, and you don't want the heater to go dry. So I wouldn't really put it in the pump chamber, even though I've seen people do that. I've seen people actually set the pump on the heater, which is an option. I put the heater inside of this passageway right here where a lot of water is passing across it, and I think that's going to work just fine. It does not stick up above the overflow. The pump cannot drain this low enough that the heater goes dry. My next optimizations happened in the evaporation chamber. I've got my K1 media and my sponges in here. What I did was add an air stone. This air stone used to be in the aquarium. It's kind of an eyesore. Most people don't like the look of having an air stone in the aquarium. So I've dropped it in here. This is part of my system. It's oxygenating my water without being seen in the aquarium. And it also is keeping a little bit of water movement in there. Should keep it healthier. Same thing here. I've added another air stone to this tank. The other thing I've done, I've taken my 2 drip hoses. These come off of this T-valve on the return, and they sit there and continuously drip water in. So I've got my refugium filled with plants. I've got my 2 drip hoses on it, and I put a light right here so that plants can grow inside that refugium. That should help me clean the water, remove nitrates. Now the next thing I want to do involves the overflow. So our overflow is right there, and it is just pumping water out into the tank. It is blasting high volumes of water, and I don't know that I like it just blasting the water straight out like that. I'd rather give it some direction. Our canister filter's blowing water this way. This canister filter's blowing water out this way. And the result of all this is all of my floating plants stay over here, which I like. I want to have some floating plants. They give the aquarium some shade. It's not overly bright over here, and some fish prefer that. So I kind of like having the plants blown this way. And that is because of my overflow and because I put a wave maker right here. Now that wave maker is kind of a big deal. It's oxygenating the water. You can see that working there. But whenever I put this overflow box on, the first thing that happened was all these plants sucked over and they were trying to go in my overflow. And I don't want my overflow clogged with floating plants, but I don't want to take out all the floating plants. So I put that wave maker in. It's blowing water across the surface, blowing anything that floats away, and the water that goes into that overflow is having to suction up from the bottom. It gives me a current and it keeps plants from sucking into the overflow. So the wave maker was the next thing I did. But now I want to make a change to my return. Now that we've turned up the pressure, we're pushing 1,200 gallons per hour out of that single return. And that is a fairly small return to run 1,200 gallons per hour. So it's blowing really hard and creating a strong current across the top, which in general is not a terrible thing, but that's too much. So what we want to do is make a spray bar. I just got a short piece of pipe, an elbow, straight piece of pipe, and a cap. Drilled a bunch of holes in it to let that water out. Some of this is going to spray a little bit up, and some of it's going to spray out. Alright, so I just popped that on. It didn't need glued or anything. I've actually got the water level higher than I wanted. I want this water level down here. And I had the water level set here when I turned the pump up, that drained the sump down and filled the tank up. So I'm gonna drain this down to where I wanna keep it all the time. Look at those awesome fish. They don't love that this siphon tube is in here. Weirds them out just a little bit. Aren't those some great looking fish? Now if you look at that spray bar, now that water is distributing all the way across there. Some of it's pointing down, but some of them are pointing up. And what that's doing is splashing up onto the lid, and this is keeping it aerated. I might twist that down a little bit. It's splashing on the lid more than I want it to. That's gonna keep the lid clean. It's keeping turbulence in the water. It's spreading that out. So we did have a strong current across here, and now there's still a current, but it's not enough that it's gonna like drag the fish across the tank or push the fish across the tank. So I think that spray bar is a nice little upgrade. I think the spray bar cost me like $1.50 to build. Just 3 little fittings. I already had the pipe from doing the rest of the sump build. But I think these are small upgrades. I really like having all the floating plants over here, the growing chamber in the refugium, the wave maker to keep things from trying to float into the overflow box, the heater out of the tank, the aeration out of the tank. I think these are all nice little upgrades. And I think once this sump has been on here for a week or two, you'll see it in a future video that this is really going to clean this up and make this tank have that nice crystal clear water that we all want. So stick around for updates on future videos. Maybe the thumbnail of this video will have a shot after this has been running for a few days. Anyway, I appreciate you taking time to watch the video. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.